You're listening to the Label Machine series, a podcast to inspire and help indie record labels and artists to build income streams for their music. I'm Nick Sadler, a music entrepreneur that has helped start and run multiple indie record labels. In this series, I'll be speaking with music industry leaders about their experience and the lessons they learned on how they both market and grow their music income. Welcome to the Label Machine series, where we discuss with successful industry professionals how artists and record labels market and sell their music. My name is Nick Sadler, and today's guest is Erin Jacobson. Erin is an internationally recognized attorney with clients that include Grammy and Emmy award-winning artists. She was named top music lawyer by Billboard and has been featured in Forbes Magazine, and on TV networks ABC and BBC, and serves on the board of directors for the Association of Independent Music Publishers. She is the author of the book Don't Get Screwed: How to Protect Yourself as an Independent Musician, and is the founder of the Indie Artist Resource, a platform that allows a central location for the legal and business needs of independent musicians. She also has her finger on the pulse as a member of the Audio Engineering Society and as a DJ on Radio KSCR. Erin, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thanks. So
I will just let you know the DJ thing, that was actually years ago. And the AES. So that was, like when I first started in the industry, but it's always a part of me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't think anybody, I guess radio DJing still a thing, but with COVID, I don't think anybody's really DJing much these days.
No, or you're in the studio by yourself, basically, or you're doing it remotely. But
doing a Twitch stream seems to be the one that most of the artists I work with now.
Yeah.
So first question I have for you. Now, your title is Erin M. Jacobson, ESQ, which I imagine means Esquire. So
yes.
What does Esquire mean? So I'm from the European side. So
exactly, and it means something totally different.
Yes, exactly.
So it's kind of funny. So in the United States, it means someone that is an attorney that's able to practice law in the United States. It's sort of like, a doctor has like MD at the end of their name or something. So it's sort of like that. But in England, it's actually a very old term that means like a man of nobility. So I've had actually UK like clients or colleagues, business people say to me like, why are you referring to yourself as a man? And I'm like, no, it means something different here.
Yeah. And you know what? Like in today's climate, it could be a thing.
It could be, but it's for me, it's just the attorney designation.
Yeah. So, and that is and for our listeners as well, we have lawyers in the UK and Europe, and we have attorneys in the US.
So it would be like a solicitor in the UK. That would be the equivalent.
A solicitor.
Yeah.
Okay, so pretty standard. The first question I'm going to go in with, the second question I'm going to go in with is where did you get started in the music industry to kind of where you go now? So you touched on you're doing a bit of DJing as well. Just talk us through a bit of history.
Yeah, so I've always loved music. I've decided that the term for me was a professional appreciator of music, because I'm not a musician. But just even as a child, I've just always loved music, always had my favorite artists that I was into, and didn't know that there was anything to do in the music industry aside from being a musician. I had no idea about the business side of things until I got to college. And they had a music industry program. And so I took the introduction class, and then that explained, this is what a manager does. This is what an agent does. Here's these things called copyrights and these contracts that these lawyers handle. And so I really liked the copyright and the contracts part of it. And really, it just kind of clicked for me. And started also hearing all those stories about artists signing these deals that they were getting screwed because they didn't understand what they were signing. And I thought, wow, that's a real job. I could go to law school, become a lawyer, and actually represent music creators and like protect them from these bad deals and help them with their careers. And so I just never, like, I made the decision, that's what I'm doing. That job sounds awesome, and never looked back after that. So that's when I also just kind of immersed myself in the whole music industry. So started DJing. I had independent bands on my radio show like every week for a in-studio live set and interview, and was promoting concerts on my college campus, and then actually had a podcast after that, in between college and law school, and then went to law school and focused all my classes, as many classes as I could, on entertainment law. Of course, there's required classes you have to take too, but anytime that I got to choose, I would take an entertainment class, and then graduated, passed the bar exam, which is the licensing exam here, and opened my own law practice. And I've been doing that ever since. And then Indie Artist Resource, which is separate from my law practice, I started that because I was getting a lot of calls from independent musicians that were just not at the level in their career that they could hire an attorney, but they really still needed help, and they needed agreements and education and things like that. So that's why I started Indie Artist Resource, to provide this hub for independent musicians to get contract templates, based, for the most common types of contracts that they needed, and learn, and all these different things. So they're two separate things, but both things that I love. So
yeah, I mean, I discovered you from the Indie Artist Resource as well. And first of all, I want to say, like, it's quite I have to say, it's a very honorable thing to, when you're at college, going, hey, I can help out all these artists and really help them out, especially on the legal side, and making that your mission is amazing. And I'm sure there are hundreds of artists that are very thankful that you chose that path. I did want to focus on the Indie Artist Resource because I think it's an incredible service that you offer for artists. So, I mean, you touched briefly sort of what it does, but what are the sort of main activities of the company, and I guess how does it differ to hiring an attorney?
Mm-hmm. So the main activities are, there are contract templates for the most needed contracts for independent musicians. And then there's educational materials. So that is like videos and audio recordings and things that they can learn from. And then writing my book was an extension of that, because there's so much misinformation out there about the different royalty streams and what copyright means and why you need to have one and all these different things. So the book was to really just kind of dispel all those myths and condense the information that you really need to know, and just put it out there in a plain English, short, to the point way, and really just break it down. Like, I have a whole chart and chapter about the different royalties, and like, this is what they are, this is when they get paid, this is who pays them to who, this is how you collect it. So those are the main functions of Indie Artist Resource. And then remind me how's that different from an attorney?
Yeah.
So when you hire an attorney, it's a personalized service that is customized to what you need. So if somebody is hiring me to draft an agreement for them, for example, I'm drafting that language in the contract to fit exactly the situation that they might be in, because every situation is different. There might be different nuances and whatnot. The contracts on Indie Artist Resource are templates. So they're based on the contracts that I use in my practice. So they're really high quality, but it's a template, so it can't be customized to every specific situation. So there's spots to fill in that are the typical spots that get filled in, such as royalties or payments or the party information or things like that. But you can't customize all the language if you have, different variables in a specific situation. So it's a do-it-yourself solution.
Yeah, and I guess as well, like part of customizing it as well as on behalf of your clients, you're going to be negotiating as well, like you're going back and forth, which is a big part of what you do. So I guess it's not going to include that. And so if I've downloaded something, you mentioned videos. Do the videos break down what the different clauses mean as well? So if I do want to use one of these templates, and I'm new to this as well, is there videos that are going to sort of say, look, this is what this bit means and this is how you fill it out?
So the templates come with instructions, but I'm in the process of new videos for the site. But there's also a fine line that I have to walk there, because it can't be interpreted that I'm giving people legal advice. There's disclaimers on everything on the site that, I'm not acting as your attorney in this situation. You're downloading a template. So I can't say like, this is what you should put here.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So it is like one step removed. I'm providing a resource, based on my education and skill, but I can't advise people how to use that.
Read your book. I guess read your book. Read your book, and then
as well. And that has a disclaimer too. And I'll just add that for the podcast here. Anything I say on this show is not legal advice. Doesn't create an attorney-client relationship between me and anyone listening. It's informational and educational information. So the book provides a wealth of information, but again, it's educational. So it's not, I'm not like giving a specific person advice, but it really, the thing with the book is that people kept saying to me, do you know of a book, or can you recommend a book that really just breaks down all these basics and explains, publishing and copyright and royalties and et cetera. And while there are some really great books out there, I did not find one that really was at that foundational level. So again, that's why I wrote it, because then if you're reading one of the other really well-known books that are great, you kind of already have that foundation of understanding it, and then you can build upon it.
I completely agree. There's as you know, I've got a book coming out in a month, and one of the sections, I should say, is on copyright and royalties. And that was 80% of my time was spent writing that part of the book, because I just wanted to get it. I get the same thing. I get so many questions from artists not understanding it. I wanted to have this really concise way of explaining a very, very complicated beast. And where my kind of angle on it was that a lot of people, because artists have become very international these days, if you upload something and it's on Apple Music and Spotify, right, you've got people in the US, you've got people in England, you've got people in Australia, New Zealand, everywhere. So your music is being released internationally, and there's a lot of confusion about how the publishing and copyrights work in the different countries on either side of the Atlantic. And I hope that I've managed to explain what those differences are as well. So I've kind of, deconstructed it and then said, like, this is what it's like on this side and this is what it's like on this side. But it was so hard to write, and it was so hard. Yeah. And I've got a friend who's a lawyer, and, she looked over it and things like that. But yeah. It is. It's, and I have to say, all honesty, I haven't read your book now. The only reason is because I didn't want to be what's the word, swayed by other people. So I didn't read.
Yeah, when you're in creative mode, you kind of have to be in your own mode.
Yeah, like
yeah.
Ari Herstand, he's got his book out as well, and I haven't read that either because I didn't want to be like, half of it was like I didn't want to be swayed, and half of it is also I didn't want to be like maybe discouraged and gone, oh no, I haven't done this or I haven't covered this, but yeah, now my book's out, I'm gonna start digesting a few more. So you practice in California, you're based in LA. So what about the international artists that might come on your website? So for instance, I'm based here in London. Can I use these contracts as well? Like have you got a way that can be changed? Talk me through that part of it.
So again, they don't get changed based on where the person is that's purchasing them. They are drafted under California law. So anyone that uses them is subject to California law if they use them. It's it's whoever is interested, is their personal choice, whether they're okay with that or not. I do usually, when I get international artists that send a question through the site of like, can I use this or something? What I often recommend is, maybe having it reviewed by a UK solicitor just to make sure that everything's, compliant. But, again, it's a personal choice. I have to draft under California law because that's where I'm licensed. And
so for the listeners, that when you say it's drafted under California law and that's what you're signing, correct me if I'm wrong, but that means that should there be a dispute, it will be settled in the state of California.
Right. So what one of my clients calls it is the litigation vacation.
It's nice.
It's nice here. Come visit LA when everything's open again to do that. But no, but yeah, again, that's what it means. So it's under the provisions of California law, and if there was a dispute, that's where it would be subject to. So.
That's where you'd be flying up to.
Mm-hmm. And that might be cost prohibitive for people as well, because if nobody's located there, could be an issue. But again, like the resource is there, so it's totally available for anyone.
So excellent resource for I was going to ask about what kind of level, but it's somebody who is I guess an independent and someone maybe at the beginning of their career. What about I'm an artist and I need something a little bit more advanced? Like, is there a way of upscaling? I'm not sure if that's the right word, or working with you. How does that work?
I mean, if anybody wants to work with me, they just hire me through my regular law practice. Because again, that would go into that customized, customized drafting or custom advice or anything like that. So, so my website is themusicindustrylawyer.com. And if anybody needs anything that's, specific to their situation, they would just reach out through there rather than going through Indie Artist Resource.
Gotcha. I'll make sure we put that link in the.
I'll make sure you have all of them.
Yeah. So protecting your music interests is important, such as copyright. But how can being legally protected maximize your royalty streams, say that you get from Spotify and Apple Music, if at all?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's kind of the getting paid part is sort of two parts. So on the legal side, it's making sure, who's owning it, and then who's supposed to be paid what. So, I mean, if it's an artist that's owning their own masters or hiring a producer or something like that, then it's clear, maybe the artist owns the masters and maybe they have to pay the producer a certain percentage, or, or just making sure that they have the ownership and maybe they don't have to pay people percentage. I mean, depends what kind of deal we're talking about. But then also, when doing a deal with the label, then it's, what is the artist supposed to get paid? Usually the label's going to own the masters, not always, but usually. And then what is the artist supposed to get paid from that agreement? So it's really making it clear who owns what, who's supposed to get paid what, because then that translates into how everything happens in real life. The second part of that is metadata and making sure that the metadata is correct, because that's what the digital services are looking toward to know, because they're not going, oh, well, this artist has a deal with this label, and so the label's paying the artist this percent. Like, they don't know any of that. They just know this is the artist, this is the master owner, whether it's the artist or a label or whoever, and this is, so we need to pay that person.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then at that point, like, let's say it's an artist and a label, then it's the artist making sure that the label is paying them what they're supposed to be paying them based on whatever's in the contract. So, I mean, the legal does dictate some of the metadata, but it's also kind of separate in that it becomes more of kind of a tech thing of making sure that all that data is attached to the files and things are registered properly. And that if there's any collection societies or anything like that, that those that the data is all correct with all those different channels, because if the data is not correct, the money is not going to get paid out and flow through whoever it's supposed to.
So I guess the contract is almost like the jumping off point. So like putting down there who owns what the percentages are. But then off the back of that, if I'm an artist, you're also going to be able to say, hey, now you've got this down on paper, like these are the different channels you need to make sure you're registering, like, with your publishing, these are the areas to make sure you're going to be getting all your royalties owed. Because you also got the education side of what you're doing as well, and explaining that to all the artists.
Yeah, and I mean that part's not going to necessarily be laid out in the contract. Company must register with this.
Yeah.
But some, the company, that's part of. Sometimes it's their job. Sometimes it's the artist or the songwriter's job, depending on what royalty stream or society we're talking about. But in the cases where it's the company's job, there have been situations where the company doesn't do it right. And so as an artist or a songwriter, it benefits you to understand what should be registered, or at least have a general idea, so that way you can kind of have eyes on it and see whether some things hasn't been done right. And it could be even within the artist team. For example, I had an artist come to me saying, well, I know my new song is getting, and this was like a known artist, and said, I know my new song is getting airplay and I'm not getting paid what I think I should be paid from my performance rights organization. And so I asked him which organization he was affiliated with. I looked it up. I mean, we were literally at an event. I looked this up on my phone, while we were there. And I looked at it immediately. I said, well, this is why you're not getting paid. It's not the registration was not done properly. It's missing information. And I said, who did this? And he's like, well, my manager did it. I'm like, well, your manager did it wrong.
Yeah.
These I've had, especially even if you're a person that has even a sort of maybe more common name as well. I've had situations where there were, two writers with the same name, and somebody registered it under the other writer's account. And so that person's like just off collecting money that doesn't belong to them. And so it's often these little details that really can affect the collection. So I'm probably one of the few lawyers that actually really focuses on those things for my clients, and is always checking them and making sure that things are looking, like they're supposed to. And
In order.
in order, yes.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny you mentioned the manager not doing it properly. It was some feedback I had from a label manager, and he was talking about like bits to focus on the book and stuff, and he said, "Oh, you should also put something in there about checking the credentials of managers." Because there are so many out there just fans of music, and they're maybe a bit of a talker, but they don't understand this, the copyright side and publishing side. And my advice is always like brush up on your copyright, and then ask them questions about like, how do I make sure my music's registered? And if a manager doesn't answer properly, don't work with them. There's
no credential for a manager. So it could be anybody that calls themselves a manager. And, oftentimes it's not the manager doing copyright registration or that day-to-day kind of stuff. But a lot of times they are. And it can be a problem. I had one situation where an artist told me, well, my manager told me to sign up with BMI because they're the largest publisher in the United States. And BMI is great, but it's a performance rights organization. It is not a publisher. And so these are, so I had to just like put a hold on everything and say, we are getting on a call. I'm going to explain all of this and what needs to be done.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of mistakes that happen sometimes, and it's just really unfortunate for the artist, especially if the artist doesn't know. Like if you're an artist and you educate yourself, then like, well, the manager's not telling me the right thing. But if the artist doesn't know either, they just believe whatever their manager tells them, and they don't realize that it's not that. They're being led down the wrong path, and there's 6 other different royalty streams that they're not collecting if they're self-published. That kind of thing.
Exactly. So if you are a manager and you're listening in, go and get a copy of Don't Get Screwed: How to Protect Yourself as an Independent Musician, because we'll also explain everything to make sure that the artists you're looking after aren't going to get screwed, and make sure they get all their royalties.
Yeah. And even though the book is titled, for independent musicians, it's for managers, it's for students learning about the music business. It's for, anyone, because again, it's just explaining all these foundational topics in our business. So, yeah.
So, hypothetical situation.
Okay.
What advice would you give to an artist that's agreed over email to release on an indie label, and they don't sign anything? And I know this happens a lot, right? Especially at the kind of like lower indie level. Now, years passed, maybe the track's sort of done all right on the underground. Manager gets involved and wants to say, hey, we need to get all our paperwork and copyright in place. What's the best gameplay here to kind of to move that forward and put that in place?
Well, it makes it a lot more difficult, because the whole reason why we have contracts is to clearly lay out what the relationship is between the parties, and in this case, that wasn't done. So let's say just and how does this work legally? In the email, it said, hey, we're going to release your music. We're going to split the royalties 50-50 net. After we've taken off the expenses for the for the DJ promo, say. And it's kind of that simple. Are they I guess who does anybody have the power in that situation? Does the artist have the power if the label decides to go, well,
we're going to keep it in rights, and the artist says, well, I want to have a licensing deal instead. And, or if it just gets sticky, is the artist able to have any legal standing to get the music taken down? Can the label just go, no, this is what agreed on email? What's your sort of take on that?
Right. Well, so in the United States, at least, copyright, when you're transferring ownership of copyright, it has to be in writing. It has to be clear. So if the email didn't have, clear language with that, then it's going to be more difficult for a third party to claim ownership. But I mean, these are the type of situations that end up potentially, either it gets into a negotiation at that point to try and work it out, or it, depending on who the parties are, it might end up in litigation, or it might be the label might be being very difficult about it. And if the artist does not have money to hire an attorney to fight it, then the artist is kind of at the mercy of the label, or the label is potentially going to be blocked by the artist all the time. And it's going to be this situation where everybody keeps sending takedowns and different things. And then it's going to end up that nobody's going to get paid for those works. So yeah, I mean, that happens a lot also with split disputes with the songwriting when that wasn't agreed upon. And then everybody's like sending takedowns because it wasn't, released. I mean, it was released and one's not getting credited, and they're this, and the companies, the streaming companies and the collection societies will just go like, we're not paying out anything until we have a definitive answer of who we're supposed to pay. So
for the listeners, explain what a split sheet is.
So a split sheet is a pretty simple agreement when you're co-writing with someone that just basically says, here's the song that we wrote on this date, and here are the people that are the writers of the songs and their percentages of what and it can vary as to like whether everybody owns their own percentages or whether they just, one person is, they run the gamut, but I mean, at the very basic level, it's like these people wrote a song together. Here are their percentages that they each own and that they can collect.
So there's like, you got like two producers and a singer in a studio, and they say, hey, we'll split it. The two producers will take 25%. The singer who's done the top line and most of the melodies is going to take 50. And you write it on a piece of paper and agree to it, essentially.
Essentially, yeah. And the thing with producers is a lot of time that doesn't get done because
a lot of the time.
Yeah, well, because not only does it not always get done with just co-writers who are not producers, but also because with a producer, there's often a producer agreement that doesn't necessarily address songwriting, because songwriting is not traditionally a producer service. So people already think like, oh, I have an agreement with the producer, and then they don't think that they need this additional split sheet to cover that side of it, because the composition side and the master recording side are two separate things. They're two separate copyrights, two separate ownerships, two separate royalty streams, everything. So I understand as well, like, artists want to get into a studio and, they want to have a vibe and see what kind of happens. But would you advise, even in those situations, if it's not going to be done at the beginning of the session, at least at the end, have that conversation right then and there when the song's just been done, even if it's a shared email or something saying, hey, this is what we agree, to get the paperwork done later, it's going to solve a whole lot more headaches down the line. Yeah. So when the paperwork's done later, it's like somebody, people forget, people are like, I really think I should have more than we talked about, or I always advocate for doing the agreements up front, especially if we're talking about a producer situation in the studio. Have the producer agreement done before you even start recording. And then as far as the split sheets, sometimes it's hard to do those before the session because you don't know, who's going to write what while you're
Yeah.
writing, but then do it at the end of the session.
Yeah.
So have it there and be like, okay, we just wrote this song and you did this. And so that's, 25% and I did this and that's whatever percent or,
Mhm.
so yeah, to do it at the time. And I know that, I get that a lot of like, oh, it's awkward to bring it up and
Yeah.
kills the vibe and da da da. But my answer to that is, first of all, if you're a professional, this is what professionals do. And secondly, if the other person's going to have a problem with it, they need to understand that this benefits them as much as it benefits you. So it shouldn't be like you're the bad guy because you want, something written on paper. It benefits everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Just be a professional, and that's always the answer. This is what professionals do. I thought you were a professional. Yeah, I'm a professional. Cool. Let's sort it out now.
Yeah.
So with record label deals, there is, like you said, a label can own, and we're going to talk about the master copyrights on this, owning the master copyrights forever versus licensing the music. And traditionally it was owning it in perpetuity, and now there's licensing is a more popular agreement to have because the artist essentially gets to keep the copyright. What's your recommendation for a record label owner? Like, should they be going for perpetuity, or do you say, hey, you should do licensing? It's a fair way of doing it now. What's your take on it?
Yeah, it depends on the goals of the company always, because some companies really want to be that artist friendly partner more than others do. So it kind of depends on who the company is that I would be advising.
Gotcha.
But from a company standpoint, especially for a record label, record labels are basically built on owning the master assets. That is, if you take everything else away, that's what they have. So that's, still the default for, I would say, the majority of labels. And that is why they're also so reluctant to give them back a lot of the time, because again, this is what their business is based on, is owning these masters. So yeah,
So if you're a label looking for, like, I want to run a label for the next 50 years, then you're going to want to make sure you keep those masters for perpetuity. If you are maybe being more of a, like you said, artist friendly label, and you're like concentrating more on the management side of things, and the label is just a way to facilitate that, you're more likely to say go with a licensing deal.
Yeah, and in either of those situations, they can do either. But yeah, I would say those are the more kind of typical mindsets of it. But there's still a lot of labels that even the label isn't their main focus, but they still try and own the masters because that's just how labels have traditionally worked. But yeah, I agree with you that there is, because artists can have more control and they want more transparency, and there is more of a trend towards licensing, which is good for the artist. Although if they're trying to license in perpetuity, it's like, well, how, it's not really that different, because the artist doesn't get them back. So and I have seen some labels trying to do that, and it's like, oh, right.
Oh, I didn't think about that. License it in perpetuity. It's like, you still own the copyright, but you
don't, but you're the one that like has all the right, the exclusive right to do anything with it.
So if you do a 10-year licensing deal, at the end of that 10 years, does that essentially mean that the rights automatically go back to the artist, and the label must stop, like take it down from Spotify, and Apple Music, or does it just give the artist the option to take that off? And if they don't, it just kind of keeps rolling over. Like, what happens at the end of those licensing deals?
Yeah, so it depends how it's drafted because there can be different situations, but we'll just, for purposes of this question, we'll just say that it just ends at the end
Hmm.
of 10 years. So usually there's a collection period. So the label will have, a year, 18 months, something like that because of the income pipeline.
Hmm.
They will have time to still collect on what was exploited during the term, but then at that point the rights will revert back to the artist, in which case, not necessarily that they usually have to be taken down, but there's at least kind of a notification um, to whoever the payors are, the streaming services or whoever, that you now have to pay this person, not this label, or you have to pay
Gotcha.
this new label or whatever, whatever's been done at that point. But yeah, I mean, the control reverts back to the artist in this example. The payments would start going through the artist. Um, and
Gotcha.
again, like there's different scenarios of what could happen if nobody doesn't, that's bad.
Nobody does anything.
Sorry. If no one does anything,
Yeah.
the company will just keep on collecting because they'll be like, well, you didn't,
Yeah. You're still
you
getting your
didn't close the
50% at the end of
job.
the
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
So, and that happens a lot. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I advocate for education so much, because there will be artists, or if it's a publishing deal, will be songwriters, and they just won't realize that they actually have to do something when that term is ending. And so the company will be like, well, they didn't like do anything to change the payee or any,
Mm,
or tell us like, okay, the deal's done now.
yeah.
Uh, so yeah, the company will just maintain the status quo and keep collecting,
Mm,
as if the deal was still in place.
mm, yeah. I think a lot of those contracts as well, they've got a thing saying, unless you come to us, it's just, yeah, like you say, status quo, and it'll just keep going through. Um, so what rookie mistakes or common problems do you see over and over again? What would be the number one?
Yeah, I would say there's two. One is signing things without understanding what you're signing. Well, I'll make this into three. One is signing things without understanding what you're signing. Two is not doing any agreements because you don't understand what you need to do with the agreements. And then three is lack of education, which kind of plays into the two that I just mentioned, because you don't understand either what you should do or not do. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that sign things because they're excited to get offered a deal, and then they realize like, oh, this wasn't so good, this thing that I
Mm,
signed. And then they want to try and get out of it, and sometimes they can, and many oftentimes they can't. So,
mm,
and then um or like happens so many times, people just don't do anything because they don't understand what they need to do. They don't understand the agreements, they don't understand the rights involved. um and then maybe they don't want to kill the vibe, or they just think like, oh, it'll be cool, I know that guy, he's fine. But
really, the guy's a snake.
yeah, and when money starts coming in, cool
Yeah.
people sometimes get not cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, so those are and that's, again, why I try and put out all this educational stuff, is to really, at the very least, understand the basics and understand I need a legal representative to help me with this.
And
Because
what if someone's like, I'm a poor as artist, but I've been
yeah.
offered this deal, and I'm like, attorneys are expensive. I haven't got a dime to my name. Would your advice say, look, just scrape and borrow to get to pay a lawyer to look at this, or at least just get educated?
Yeah. I would say, and I'm not saying this because I'm a lawyer, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's an investment in your career, and it's much more expensive to try and get out of something or to be in something that's bad where maybe your music isn't even being released, or it's like a really bad relationship, and then you're prevented from working with other people that actually could further your career. So spending, a few $100s up front to make sure that it's done right is going to save you a lot of money and a lot of headaches in the long run. Because again, especially if something would get to the point of litigation, I mean, you don't even file something in court without 5-figure sum to start. So so it can be very cost prohibitive for a lot of people. So it really is a good investment to have it done right up front and know what you're doing, and have somebody that's qualified to be assisting you with that. And that means somebody that, if it's a music deal, somebody that is experienced in doing music deals, not like your brother-in-law that's some other, a lawyer and some
a property lawyer.
Yeah. So,
oh, look at that, Sonny. Yeah, that's exactly. The worst.
So, because every area of law is different. It has different nuances and custom and practice, and the music industry is very specific. Even between film and music industry, there's a lot of differences in how things are done. So that's that. I mean, if somebody really can't, get some money together to do it, sometimes there are like charities that do like, free legal clinics, or sometimes like schools have programs where the students are like practicing and their professors, kind of watching over it and stuff. So it's not, I can't speak for any of them as to whether they're good or not good, but
clearly that is better than doing nothing at all.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Gotcha. So if you are an artist listening, I always, my big thing is make sure you're investing in your career. It's, even whether you're doing investing in your branding or advertising. So put a few $100s aside for your legal 100%. So I'm going to jump onto some sort of some standard sort of music trend questions.
Okay.
So I know you can't speak about, the clients that you work with because you've got the confidentiality, but I know you have a lot of experience, like with what's going on in the music world. So for record sales at the moment, where are you finding your artists finding most of their royalties are coming from? Like, is it Spotify? Is it iTunes, Amazon, vinyl, physical?
Mm-hmm. Again, totally depends on who the client is and who their audience is. Because, as I'm sure like vinyl is kind of a big thing now, but not for a lot of artists. So it depends who the artist is, who their audience is, what genre they're in, things like that. I would say on average, the majority is coming through Spotify and YouTube. But which is kind of unfortunate because the rates are so low compared to if you would equate, 1 million streams on Spotify to, 1 million sales of a physical product or even a download. I mean, the money is so much different. So it's not like it's equivalent to what they could be making if certain formats were more popular as they used to be. But yeah, I would say in this very digital world, probably Spotify and YouTube are on average most consistently the biggest.
So with YouTube royalties, are you saying
what's the ad revenue share?
Revenue share stuff.
Yeah, if they have all the view. And I mean, it depends again, if who owns the assets as well. So because there is a whole like back end payment system for things. But
Spotify.
Yeah.
I know you did something recently on NFTs as well. What is, I mean, I thought one thing about NFTs, which is really exciting, is the ability for essentially when the asset is sold on, a percentage of that goes back to the main, to the original copyright holder, which I think is really exciting. Do you see this as a fad, or do you see this as something that is real and is something that the music industry is going to adopt?
Yeah, the music industry is generally slow to adopt, or historically slow to adopt new technologies. We would have been streaming a lot sooner, I think, or at least embrace downloading a lot sooner, like when that whole Napster thing came about, years ago. The industry bought it instead of trying to work with it. So it really remains to be seen. I think there's so much hype right now that a lot of companies are at least looking into it. I feel like a lot of indie labels are really trying to determine whether they should release an NFT. But the technology is so new, it really does remain to be seen as to whether it's going to be a fad or whether it's going to be a long-lasting technology. We just don't know yet.
Very early days. What is the major difference for driving sales at a major record label compared to a indie record label or a self-releasing artist?
Well, major labels generally have a lot more money behind them. So
money is the short answer.
Yeah, pretty much. Because I feel like a lot of what both would try to do is the same thing. I mean, you want people to listen, you want people to purchase, you want people to go to the shows and buy the merch and all that stuff. But the label has the money to put the promotion behind it. The label will be able to pay for independent promotion and get things on radio, which really I don't think is as dead as people say it is often. So, I mean, that is still, if you're a top level artist, radio is still important for getting your new single out there and all that kind of stuff, even though the fans will go to the digital channels to do that. But it's still an important medium, and they'll be able to get, the appearances and that kind of stuff. Whereas the more independent artists or self-release artists will have to really focus more on fan engagement and relationships and, maybe partnering with sites that can help them and, figuring out how to work the algorithms and all that kind of stuff, because they're not going to have all that money behind them that the labels will have. So they kind of have to go about it in a different way. But ultimately, the goal for both, label releases and independent self-releases is the same, as to be gaining fans, getting as many plays and streams as possible, getting people to come to the shows. All those different things. So it's kind of like working with what you have, basically.
Yeah. You mentioned radio is still relevant. Do you think music blogs are still relevant today?
I don't know if they're as relevant as they used to be. To be honest, I'm not really on those blogs. So I'm not, because I'm busy working all day. But I mean, so they might be. I know that they were really, really popular at one point, but I don't know if they still hold that same popularity. I feel like playlists and things like that have sort of
Spotify playlists have taken over, haven't they?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you found anything that works well for your artists to get on the bigger playlists on Spotify?
Again, I feel like it's really more of building that fan engagement, because when you have streams on your own and you have the social media numbers and stuff, like, unfortunately, instead of artist development, our industry for new artists is so based on the numbers. But when you're but when you can cultivate those followers and those streaming numbers and all that, you have a better chance of being noticed, so you can get on those playlists. So that's, I think, for the indies, it's really that foundation of, building the numbers so that you can get to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You're right. People do look at numbers. I mean, I do it as well. I'm guilty of it. As soon as someone's like, check this artist out, I'll listen to the music, and as I'm listening to the music, I'm just Googling, are they coming up? And then I'm looking at the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Like, oh, they have 300 followers versus, oh, they have 300,000 followers.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, love to hear more.
Yeah.
We are. Yeah. I mean, and I am guilty of that. But do you think now though with Spotify that out of all the numbers that actually mean something, that because you can sort of almost fake it on Instagram or Facebook, or you can buy a lot of those numbers. You can get sort of. You're right. 100%. You shouldn't do it. But I do know people do that. Whereas Spotify, if you go on there and you see how many monthly listeners they've got, would you say that's a pretty clear indicator of how well an artist is doing?
Yeah, well, I think that's, again, like buying fake followers does nothing for you except the initial, like, ooh, they have so many. But then, anyone interested in signing you is going to realize that those are fake when they look into it. But having, that consistent and growing fan engagement and monthly listeners and that kind of stuff, that is building a fan base. And that's what labels want to see with artists, is that fan base, because that translates to money. So that's what they like to see. So yeah, and I mean, even if you remain an independent self-release artist, it doesn't matter if you have a bunch of fake followers. That's not going to do anything for actually making you a living, because they're just fake. But if you have, again, this fan base that you've built that will consistently support you, then that is the makings of, a career potentially, or at least some ongoing income. Yeah,
definitely. I wholeheartedly agree. And I discourage anybody from, buying followers, or, even guarantee, where people, there's a lot of, I'm seeing on Instagram popping up, guaranteeing Spotify streams. They're just bots. They're bot farms.
Yeah. Anything with those bots. I mean, people are going to find out, they're going to know. And it doesn't do you really any good, because it's not a sustainable continuing source of income. And again, if somebody's looking to sign you, they're going to figure it out. And then you just look like a phony. So
yeah. Well, and also I know the Spotify algorithms are getting better at picking them out. And I know, artists, I've seen some reviews on some of these sites that claim it, and they're like, don't do it. I lost, Spotify canceled my account, said it was on bots, and that's it. Stuffed. You got to create a whole new artist name.
Yeah.
The rare sync deals. Have you found any ones that work, or what works well in Hollywood and LA at the moment?
As far as what, like what they're looking for, or?
Yeah, I guess nowadays, I mean, I guess what are sync agents looking for at the moment? Yeah, what kind of music?
It's always changing. I think right now we're still kind of in that like new cover of old song kind of thing. There was like a ukulele trend for a while. So it's always kind of adapting. What I've been seeing, at least on like television commercials and stuff, it's again, like still kind of covers of older songs that are kind of more newer, more singer-songwriter-ish. And then, a lot of using like the older classic stuff. So, which is great for the older catalogs, because they need to keep earning money as well. And it's not always like, the major songs. I mean, sometimes it's smaller songs from known artists that, that don't really get radio play and people aren't streaming them so much anymore. But it really depends on the project, because every project is different. They're looking for different things. There's a lot of kind of, I think, still period style music, because there's a lot of programs that are more like historical dramas or different, take place in a different time period. And sometimes they want authentic music, and sometimes they want music that sounds like it's from that time period, but it's not as expensive as music from that time period. So I think there's still quite a bit of that going on, but it's been, I don't know, it's kind of been all over the place lately. And, also a lot of, because of the pandemic, a lot of shows that were going into production got put on hold. And so I think some people were affected by that, some people were not. So it just kind of depends.
So I think we're coming to the end here. What does the future hold for you, Erin, and what does it hold for the indie artist resource? Like, have you got any other new projects coming up?
Yeah, well, Indie Artist Resource, there's going to be a lot more resources on the resource. So we're in process of a lot of really cool upgrades, and so stay tuned for that. You can get on the mailing list. If you sign up on the mailing list, you'll get the 10 most the questions most asked by independent musicians, with some answers and resources for that, which is free when you sign up. But yeah, so there's a lot of exciting stuff coming with that. That's going to be, I think, really just even more, more benefit to independent musicians. And then, as far as my practice, I just, keep doing what I'm doing, bigger and better.
Bigger and better. Well, yeah, we should. There'll be links below here when you're listening to this to go to the indie resource.
Yeah, I can go through real fast if you want. So my website is themusicindustrylawyer.com, and Indie Artist Resource is at indieartistresource.com. And that also has links to my book, but my book's also available on Amazon. If you just search for my name or the title, Don't Get Screwed, How to Protect Yourself as an Independent Musician.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Erin. That was, very enlightening. And you're the first attorney I've had on the podcast.
Thank you.
And so you're the best that I've had on the podcast.
And, happy to come back anytime. There's more relevant topics that you need someone with a legal background to talk about. So
awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.